How about Black Thanos? Isn't Thanos already black?
What the fuck am I?
You're currently being live streamed, my friend. What's up?
Oh, hi. Not much.
Did you have any idea why there were already people in that voice channel?
No, I didn't. I don't know why you chose me in particular.
You're luck of the draw, my friend.
Wow, I'm actually being live streamed.
Yeah, so don't say like the N-word.
I won't.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. I get that feeling from you, you know? That you might be on edge a little bit. A little bit of tension you might want to relieve.
Yeah, you kind of just pulled me. I was like, why the heck am I being taken out? And I was like, oh, okay. What's up, man?
I don't know. I mean, if you don't have like a question or a debate topic, I'm gonna move to somebody else, but
Well, I mean, a debate topic. Want to talk about nationalism?
Nationalism?
Yes.
Are you right-leaning?
Moderately right.
Uh-oh. Hey, yeah, hit me up. Why should I... Hit me up.
Hit me with a question. I mean... Well, I mean, nationalism is such a fucking broad question. I don't know how to narrow this. I mean, do you believe in nationalism of any kind?
I mean, I believe it exists, and I think that sometimes nationalism can be a useful tool for oh right, these guys don't attack you. For liberation movements, you know, or ethnically displaced communities. But for the most part, nah, nationalism's pretty fucking cringe. I don't give a shit about states or countries or borders. I just care about people. I want to make people's lives better. What do you like about nationalism?
I mean, it's kind of natural. I think it's very good for people to feel like they believe in themselves. And plus, people are also very different in terms of culture, race, and such, so I don't see why you want to take it away from people.
Whoa, I mean, those are kind of some disparate arguments there. Nationalism can't be natural. We've only had nationalism as a concept for like a few hundred years. It's been around for a while longer than that.
Nationalism used to. Well, I mean, no, nationalism has always been around for quite a long time. Usually not. I mean, usually in the sense of people of very similar or same genetic phenotypes and all that such collectivizing together. Yeah.
Wait,
genetic.
Are you American?
Yeah.
So when people say, like, when people are proud to be an American, they're expressing a love for their genetic phenotypical expression of Americans?
Well, well, that's a very tricky question because as of today, America is not mono-ethnic culture, and so, yeah.
There are tons of nationalist countries that aren't mono-ethnic. China is incredibly nationalist, and it's comprised of like 50 different ethnic communities, of which the Han Chinese are the majority.
Yeah, for the most part, but I mean, they are still genetically similar enough.
Wait, what does genetics have to do with patriotism?
Well, patriotism? Well,
wait, when you said nationalist, did you actually mean white nationalist? Did
well,
you do the
I chose nationalism as a broad sense. I guess nationalism could either evolve that to the state and into ethnicity, but I mean, a nation is essentially the people that comprise of it. So
well, yeah, a nation is, you know, a legal sort of, you know, archetype that surrounds like a given geographic area, and presumably the people who live on it. There are Americans who don't live within America, of course, you know, and I suppose they would comprise the American national identity. You've got troops in military bases, for example, and but for the most part, it seems to be like a geographic legal entity. I don't know about like ethnicity. I mean, usually when people talk about like happy to be an American, we're talking about like cultural or legal elements, you know. I don't know if that's necessarily an ethnic thing.
Well, I mean, America before the 1960 Immigration Act. Well, I guess American would be considered also an ethnic type of thing since it was majority white. But I mean, as of now,
white isn't an ethnicity, though.
White isn't. Well, no, I'm sorry. You're right. It is. It's race. I mean, I guess one could even argue it's almost the same thing.
Well, no.
Or at least, similar enough. Because I
Well,
mean, yeah, there's the white race, and even within those, there's different ethnicities within that white race.
but an
Like maybe
ethnicity is composed by a sort of cultural, linguistic, or shared geographic origin. But white people have
yeah,
existed across the breadth of the earth for quite a long time with vastly different cultures. They're not one and the same ethnicity. Africa is the most genetically diverse continent on the world, and I'm pretty sure if I went from Cape to Tip, I'd find people that I would describe ubiquitously as black, but I would cross across more ethnicities than I would walking from one end of the United States to the other.
fair point. When people typically talk about the white race, they typically refer to the white Europeans. And yeah, you are right. And also, yeah, you are right. Africa is a very genetically broad continent. However, and yeah, and most of the conflicts there are not just black people killing each other. It's different tribes killing each other, which also still fits my theory of people being genetically similar enough, collectivizing together,
Well,
even if it's in
I'm
a tribalistic point
Yeah, I'm
of
not
view.
disagreeing with the existence of tribalism, but most of the problems in Africa are caused by Europeans deciding the borders between different ethnic and cultural divisions, ones that didn't necessarily reflect the will of the people there, and also broader economic issues, the legacy of colonialism and stuff. But I'm not denying that tribalism exists, but you can be tribal about like a lot of stuff. I don't know, like why should I care about my nation? Like why is that
Well,
important?
you live there, don't you? Shouldn't you care for your own nation? I mean,
Dude,
you
were you
live
about to
there.
say my own race?
Yeah. I mean, you can also care about your own race, but I mean,
Why
nation
shouldn't
is
why shouldn't I just care about like the people who live in America? Like why does the nation state matter to me as opposed to the people here, the policies?
I mean, depends. I mean, mm, why should you not care about the nation? Why you should care? Well, I mean, the nation. The nation is comprised of the people. So if you care about the nation, you do essentially care about the people in it.
Oh, no. There are tons of pro-America people who don't give a fuck about the people. Like, for example, the people who conflate white nationalism with nationalism. They claim to love America, but that's not true at all. They don't care about a huge portion of the Americans who live in that country. There are a lot of people who say, America first. We care about America, American citizens. What they mean is white Americans. Tons of brown and black Americans who don't, warrant even first consideration from these people. So I would say there's a pretty big difference sometimes between caring about the nation and caring about, the people in it. Think of all of those dipshit neocons right now drumming up war with Iran. Gonna get a bunch of young Americans killed. They care about the country, but they don't give a fuck about the people in it.
Well, no, they don't care about the country. The people, the neocons and the warhawks don't care about the country. They really do. I mean that's a whole nother discussion. But in my eyes, they actually don't care about the nation state at all, or the people comprised of it. They care about whatever lobbyist groups promoting it. I mean, which is in this case one could argue would be the APEC lobby, since Israel
Oh
benefits
no.
most. That's a whole nother. I mean, that's a whole nother topic from another time.
Yeah.
But to
Of all the
also, but
lobbies,
also,
that's just the one that came to mind immediately when it comes to
yeah,
whatever.
because that's the biggest lobby in America. I mean, that's really APEC. What you said? Are you denying that APEC doesn't have the biggest
No, of course,
influence in
APAC
Congress?
has a huge influence. I thought you were like a moderate conservative, and it seems like you're leaning towards some talking points I've heard before. And
What A, what APEC? I mean, I think their lobby's one of the biggest problems in America. But like I said, we're not going to go on this discussion because it dwells away from the main talking point.
I mean, it's not like
But
I like Israel or APAC, so it's not gonna, go out on bat defending them too hard. It's more that I would argue that they're beholden to the capitalist interests of the lobbying groups that fund them. That's why they deny climate change, for example. It's the only reason why conservatives are willing to let brown people into the country at all. It's because it makes, America a fuck ton of money. So,
mhm,
yeah, I'd argue they're influenced, pretty heavily by that.
correct. Also, also another one you said about the people conflating white nationalism and nationalism. Uh, I see what you mean by that. Why these people not giving a shit about a hard swath of America, which for the most part they really don't. One could honestly argue that they do that. They are nationalistic. They're ethnically nationalists, which I don't think they're even conflating nationalism and white nationalism. I think they're making their own distinction because those people care more about their race.
Yeah. The meme they tend to engage in is that they'll say that actually white nationalism is nationalism because nationality means like an ethnic group, which it doesn't. I mean, there's no like common political or social parlance that uses that terminology. It's a way of normalizing the idea that America is a white nation first and foremost. When in reality, of course, America has been subjugated to centuries of ethnic displacement, as they would call it, that has led to it being, the way it is now. Almost an American tradition.
Well, America was supposed to actually be a white nation, quote unquote.
Well, it was supposed to be an Anglo-Saxon nation, and even then, it wasn't written into the law or constitution that it had to be.
It wasn't written into. Yeah, I mean, it was written to the. It was actually written into the law. Not like it wasn't written in the Constitution, of course. No. It was written in their immigration law at the time, which was kind of vague, which it says white persons, and I suppose when they meant white persons, they actually meant like people from like northwestern Europe, because at the time they barely considered people like Irish or like the Italians or Spaniards to be white, and I can kind of see why they wouldn't consider the Spaniards and Italians white since they were heavily colonized and race mixed by the Arabs. So, I mean, that was immigration.
There's no denying the
then.
founding fathers were pretty fucking racially biased. I think it'd be pretty silly to disagree with that, but they left it out of the Constitution. A lot of them, a lot of them spent their time, sort of criticizing the broader elements of the slave trade, but they, had themselves slaves. It seems like the founding fathers were very open to the possibility that future generations would be hashtag woker than them. And that, kind of led to things being the way they are. But even then, they bemoaned the loss of their ethnic purity. I forget which founding father it was, but they complained pretty avidly about Germans coming in and diluting the glorious Anglo-Saxon blood with their swarthy German genetics. And today, the idea of, Germans being, like, swarthy and not, like, part of the American identity is ludicrous. But at the time, that was the largest ethnic minority in the country. And then, you've had the Germans initially, the Poles came in, and the Irish and Italians. And each time, we get this big hubbubaloo about them not even really being white, and it keeps changing. And God willing, 50 years from now, it's going to be the Mexicans, too. Mexicans are going to be the honorary white folk coming in. And eventually, black folk are going to be white folk, too. And then there will be nobody left to discriminate against. God willing.
Yeah, a fun future.
Yeah.
I can just imagine that.
Well, doesn't that sound nice? I mean, surely racism is bad.
If you think that's gonna happen, racism's gonna stop.
Well, racism's been getting better for the most part, I'm being a little frivolous, of course. I don't actually think all racism will end, but racial biases have been toned down quite a bit, Nowadays, the folks that I'll call Nazis, on account of them being Nazis, are really expressing the same basic ideas about race that were commonplace like 80 years ago to most Americans. So we've obviously come a long way when it comes to our general biases concerning race.
I wouldn't exactly agree with that.
You think we're just as racially biased today as we were before the passing of the Civil Rights Act?
Yeah, I don't think racial tensions have actually changed. I think people kind of like covering up race has actually been kind of bad.
All existing polling data disagrees with you. Maybe there's as much racial tension, but in terms of actual racist belief, basically every metric for anti-racism has been increasing with time.
Wait, so anti-racist metrics have actually been increasing? What would be considered anti-racist?
Like people being in favor of interracial marriage, people believing there's an intrinsic genetic difference between white and black people, regarding their intelligence, of course. The ideas that have decreased significantly. The idea that America's a white country, the idea that black people face socioeconomic disadvantages that should be corrected for. All of these attitudes have gotten more and more progressive with time, according to all the polling data I've seen. I mean, it's possible I've missed some segment of it here, but it seems like folks are getting less racist. It's pretty nice, we're getting up there.
That's anti-racist.
I'd say
that almost sounds like delusion in my eyes.
Okay. Well, whether or not you believe it's delusional, the things that I just said, if supported, are pretty non-racist beliefs.
Oh no, I completely agree. I completely agree with you. I think everything you're saying is true. I was just saying that's probably an incorrect sentiment that people have.
Which incorrect sentiment?
Well, let's see. Well, let's go back over interracial marriages. Yeah, for the most part, people. I mean, yeah, people do kind of have more an accepting view over interracial marriage. However, for the most part, people tend to stick within their own race, and I'm not really sure because black people are extremely racist. I mean, people are
Whoa,
just
whoa,
extremely
you're
ignorant.
jumping all over the place. I mean, interracial marriages have not only gotten
Yeah.
more common, but more popular. And whether or not a person like dates people of a particular race or marries them has more to do with their environment. Like if you grow up in the Midwest where there's like two black people in your town, that's mostly all white people. Of course, white people are going to marry white people. You're not going to go out of state just to find some black dick, right? I mean, I'm sure some,
Oh
for the most
no.
part. But yeah, it seems like, just in general, these things tend to increase. You could argue people still tend to stick with those of their own race. I mean, you could argue there's even an element of legitimacy to that, because culture does, in some cases, align along people's racial identification, and people tend to like dating or marrying those who share
Well,
cultural values.
culture is race.
Well, no. Race is a broader sociological concept
Well, where
to
do you think
describe.
culture comes from?
Wait, do you think there's like a gene in your... Wait, what race are you?
I'm black.
Do you think there's like a gene in your black body that makes you like hip hop more than me?
No, I think that there's certain behaviors within races that create certain cultures.
Like what?
It- Like, I guess you could. I guess one could even argue. I guess one could argue IQ, but that's a whole different topic. But I mean, black people, I don't fucking know, tend to like very loud music or something or loud things. So
What
we
gene
could.
expression? What
I
allele
mean,
causes that?
I mean, again, I can't really give you. I can't give you gene expressions, but for the most part, Africans or blacks do like these type of rhythm. I mean, I guess one
Like
could argue.
Africans? Wait, like
Yeah,
African
black,
people
yeah, black,
also
like
like?
black, yeah, African, black Americans. I mean, we all come from the same stuff. We all come from
Well,
the same
wait, so you're
stock.
saying the musical interests of Africa are similar to the musical interests of African Americans?
Well, it certainly is highly influenced. What is Black American culture if not just an Africanized version of Western culture?
It's
I'm just,
not. That is wait. That is the most wild, like
essentially,
description. It's an Africanized. So when they made like the blues and jazz and stuff, that was like the African take on classical music. Like, what does that
Yeah, I
even
wonder.
mean?
I mean, I'm
What
just,
is the Africanization of Western culture? What?
black culture. I mean,
No,
I
no,
don't know.
but how? What African culture? You realize the cultural differences amidst Africans are more significant than the cultural differences from one corner of Europe to the other. What culture from Africa influenced Western culture to become African American? Like, these are...
I'm talking about Black American culture, which we all can. Most black people came from like Western Africa. I'm
Right,
just
so
saying.
what
I'm just.
Western
What,
African
maybe
cultural tradition
what
led
I'm
to
trying to
rap
say.
music?
What I'm trying to. What culture? What African culture?
What element of West African culture led to rap music?
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it came from Western culture. I just said it's a Black African spin on whatever Western culture.
But how?
Essentially all the. Hmm?
But you can't just say it's a West African spin culturally.
I said it's more of an African spin. It's like
Oh,
a black spin.
but
Look, what I'm trying to say is
black
that
and African don't mean the same
Black
thing.
America. What I'm trying to say is Black American culture is very different from White American culture, and that's essentially.
In some respects, but how is the Africanization? Black people didn't start affecting American culture for the most part until after the end of slavery, after which they had experienced about 300 years of their cultural identity being erased. Most, like, slaves, did you think the slaves are like tribal, like indigenous folk? They were Christians. They believed in Christian. They would sing hymns. They had black churches. It's not it's not like slavery ended and then a bunch of Africans started like changing up Western society.
Well, no, I didn't say. Well, no, I didn't say that. I said the Black American culture was essentially like Western culture with a Black African spin on.
But what is the
on it. I
African
didn't-
spin?
Just fucking like, it's kind of hard to I'm sorry. It's just so hard to describe. 'Cause I would think-
Yeah, because like when most people talk about culture, we usually talk about like social inclinations that are a product of like socioeconomic conditions. Like I could explain, for example, because I've researched this. This is part of my like sociology courses. You know how like black culture is a product of the experiences that Black Americans had following slavery. Like everything we got from like music and sport follows from like drug war, and like Harlem is a product of like the spin that they had and the presumption from white people that black people were more animalistic, so they played into that with some of their music in their clubs, the hip hop and nightlife, and white people liked that music and jazz got popular, and so on. It's like this really broad cultural mesh, but none of that was like culture equals race. It was because of the socioeconomic conditions they experienced on account of their race. But you could very well conceivably have a world where if you change a couple of factors, you would expect white people to have the cornrows and be listening to rap music, and you would expect the black people to be wearing suits and listening to... What the fuck do white people even listen to? Nobody listens to classical music. I don't know.
That's,
I don't listen. I'm white. I don't listen to classical music. I don't know. What do we listen to? Metal? Trap music?
I mean, I don't fucking...
Nine Inch Nails?
Metal, classical, I don't fucking know.
Glam rock?
No, no.
Country? Yeah, country. There we go. And black... Well, no, black people like country too. Okay, I don't know.
I don't think you'll find many black people that likes country.
I think they like some kinds of country, don't they? Isn't that the Lil Nas guy? Doesn't he do country music? I don't fucking know. I don't know anything about music.
What's the one with Miley? What the one with Silent? What's it called? Miley Cyrus's fault? Is that the one you're talking about?
No,
that's Old Country
he's
Roads.
like the little black guy, and he's like gay, and it's got horses or something like that.
About horses? Wait, I think I know what you're talking about. That's
it was
like
really popular. I haven't even listened to the song. There was something about horses. Oh, that's right. White people listen to Pete Buttigieg's song, "High High Hopes for the Livin'." You know, that's it.
Oh yeah,
that's what I
don't
listen to.
fucking know that song. I don't know. Oh no.
For real though, one of the things that I kind of worry about a little bit with this discourse is it feels like we're really, really comfortable ascribing the idea that people's racial biological traits like prescriptively describe whatever like cultural inclinations they might have in the future. And that's not really true. So
how is it not true?
What genes made white culture the way white culture is?
I mean, a specific gene.
Like what genetically led to white and black and Asian and Hispanic culture all being different?
I mean, I don't know. I guess one could argue the genetic, the different geological the different environments that they were all raised in, and so they adapted to their environments and such.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Environment has a huge factor in determining one's cultural predilections.
But even when you take away those, even when you take them away from their environment and isolate them for such a long time, they still at least retain some distinction of their culture, or at least always collectivized to certain groups. I mean, African Americans, for instance, would be going back to that. I mean, we haven't been. None of us have been to Africa for like what, entire generations.
Yeah, I've never met a black American who gave a fuck about Africa, personally.
Yeah, exactly. No one fucking cares. I mean,
but that's an argument in favor of my side, though. That just because they're black doesn't mean they have some genetic prescriptivist like need to give a shit about Africa.
Well, no, they don't. But they still give a shit about their own in-group preferences and their need to keep. Yeah, in-group preferences.
Wait, in what way, though, specifically?
I mean, what do you mean, what way? I mean, black people, do you not know how collectivized black people are? We're extremely collectivized. We always stick to one another. I mean, usually if a black person ever, like, speaks or acts any different, they tend to get called out a lot.
Well, I mean, that happens to some extent or another quite a bit for non-black people as well. I'm not arguing...
I mean, you ever hear about black people calling another black person saying that they're acting too white?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you think that's because of a genetic tendency towards saying that? Or do you think that's because there were cultural or social issues that made them act that way?
I mean, well, no, yeah, I think it's a genetic... Okay, you're saying an environmental or genetic inclination to make them say that? I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that in a way, not necessarily to make them say those specific words, but more like the need to like keep in-group preferences in a way and tribalistic nature, which is present in everyone. Maybe to different or lesser degrees, but certainly in a greater degree in this case, if
Yeah,
that's what
so
you mean.
do you think there's like a genetic component in the black brain that makes them think like, okay, I gotta look out for the black folk, you know? This is what I gotta look out for. I gotta defend black folks, hate whitey. Do you think there's like a genetic thing? Or do you think when they demonstrate in-group preferences, it's a broader product of one's cultural predilection? You know, like they were taught it or they learned it from their environment.
I mean, if that's such a weird question. I mean, that's such a weird question to ask. Um,
It's just,
I mean, I would.
it's weird for
I
me the
mean,
alternative, because if it was a genetic thing, then there would literally be like a genome that would determine this kind of behavior. But it seems to me when people really like get around with one another, when we demonstrate in-group preferences, which we do, of course, people do that along racial lines all the fucking time. I would never deny that. But it seems like when we do that sort of stuff, it's because we're taught it. I mean, after all, like you're an American black, right? I mean, who would you have more in common with? I imagine like a black dude who was born in like Los Angeles or something, the kind that I grew up with, or a fucking like random African dude, or moreover, a white dude born in Los Angeles, or a random African dude. Be willing to bet that language and similar national heritage would probably trump out in favor of your skin color. And that's why I don't like these biologically prescriptivist takes when it comes to people's culture. Black people act this way and white people act this way, sure, but when we really look at the reasons why, it's a complex tapestry of cultural influences. It's just you can get down some really bad roads when you talk about like it all being genetically determined, because then like people start getting to the IQ memes, for example, like why do black people commit more crime? Oh, the warrior gene. And we start finding conclusions that aren't supported by existing science, and sometimes then they get into racist.
If I do believe a lot of the science is actually heavily repressed. A lot of these scientists who actually go into research this stuff actually can't even get to that because oftentimes it gets called racist.
As someone who has participated in academia, I promise you that everything from black predilection towards crime to their lower average IQ in America is discussed openly in the academic environment. This conspiracy theory of there being like crazy back alley suppression, so like they parentheses are keeping like the discussion down. I have never seen this take place. In my fucking woke ass sociology courses full of trans people and sensitive babies, was able to have open conversations on the moral consequences, like the repercussions of one race being perceivably genetically inferior to another. I've seen academics publish articles on this and lively discourse at academic conferences concerning racialization and its relationship to the medicalization of IQ differences. I don't think that there's like this suppression going on.
Do they favor for or against it?
Against what?
For if there exists any evidence of this.
Of what?
Of racial differences and what you just said, like medicalization and all that. Because a lot of the people I'm describing are people who actually say that there's actually a lot of some evidence. Like there was like if you want an example, that guy that discovered. I mean, I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy. I forgot what his name was, but he's the guy that basically discovered like the DNA, the double helix. Ever heard of that guy?
Yes, and I'm aware of what he would later say. But his later statements on the heritability of IQ and what have you, if I'm recalling correctly, were fairly widely criticized and not substantiated. He was just sort of riding off his fame, having made one big discovery, to then go on and make statements on something he wasn't really that well educated on.
I mean, yeah, sure, but he actually, I see what you mean by that. But the guy was he was a very well-read and very famous guy in his field, and he just made that claim, and he ended up like fucking getting like all his fucking like academic forms like revoked or something, and had to got like shit faced on the media. It's kind of like things like that.
I mean, that's fine. Like, as an academic, being a popular academic is a huge responsibility. Your prescriptive statements can have a huge impact on the world. For somebody like that, who had done so much to contribute to the field of biology and neurobiology, like so much, to then go ahead and what were essentially and I think this is fair to say because his statements were widely criticized for good reason. Pseudo-scientific racist comments and try to like latch onto their legitimacy because of his prior established like history, that's like really fucking irresponsible. I fully support any like organizations revoking association or awards given to that person. That's a huge breach of the authority and trust given to that kind of station, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, they weren't like taking it away because he'd found like some secret truth that they were all too cucked to report on. They reported on it heavily. I mean, scientists are more than happy to talk about that that particular issue. Of course, I'm not a biologist, so I have to rely on the input of other people for most of the.
I mean, he was a biologist. I can't see. I mean, for him to
But
say
his
something like
statement
that, I don't
was
think.
wrong, though. Why? Here's the question for me, though.
I mean, it's okay for it to be wrong, but why do all of this? I mean, it just seems so weird. Weird. It doesn't seem like there was even any room for any like discussion or debate on this topic. He just suggested these claims, and then they said, "Hey, that's racist. You can't talk about that." I just found that
That's
very...
not what happened. He made strong statements and defended them publicly, and the broader academic community called him out for making pseudoscientific racist statements and abusing his position of authority to do so. And he defended those statements continuously. And then organizations and that had worked with him previously like disavowed him and dropped their association because he was. I think that's a perfectly reasonable way of responding. Nobody was just like offended he'd made those statements. I've never heard of a scientist make a legitimate claim and then them being condemned by the broader community because it was racist. I've never seen that happen personally. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, guys, in chat, fucking where the fuck are the other King's doors? Where? Tell me. Chat, I'm looking at you. But that's what I mean though. Like, there's no broader conspiracy theory to cut down on these subjects. All the subjects, race and IQ, black crime, or what have you, are discussed pretty openly and pretty heavily. The facts tend to lean in favor of, at least what I'd like to believe, you know, the arguments that I make. I see a lot of white nationalists and racists making really fucking cringe arguments on that subject, like Alt Height, for example. I just, it seems like the science, it's not settled, but there's a pretty strong consensus on these issues.
On what, race and IQ?
Yeah.
Race and IQ. So, I mean, I guess. Though, I mean, I'm not really sure. How would you explain race and IQ difference between whites and blacks, or any other race, to be honest?
Yeah, like existing in America?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the IQ difference, it is scientifically irresponsible to say that there is no genetic component whatsoever to the difference. There's literally no way of empirically verifying that, so I can't make that claim. But what it seems to be is that most of the difference is a product of socioeconomic discrimination that black people have experienced that continues generationally. There are a huge number of socioeconomic or psychological conditions that that can lead to a sort of reduction in one's broader performance. And you add those up, and in kablamo, you got IQ differences, you know?
But what about the argument when people make that says how all those differences should have been settled? I mean, what discrimination would black people face today for there to still be a difference?
I mean, the average household wealth of a black family in America right now is like 1/40th the average household wealth of a white family. The idea that there's no broader like discrimination existing right now is laughable. There's a pretty huge amount. Now, is it as bad as it used to be? Nah, of course not. You know, things have been getting better, but it's still. I mean, it's up there. You know, it's still pretty substantial. You know, plenty of black folks still getting shit on out there for their skin color. And that stuff has a pretty substantial cumulative effect, like, for example, generational inequality. There was a really interesting study I read once how people are more likely to do poorly on a test, for example, if they believe they're going to do poorly, and how those results were extrapolated, tested, and then proven when it came to socioeconomic differences. For example, people who feel they're going to do worse in a test because they've been told that like black people typically do worse in this type of test will do worse in that test if they're black more so than if they hadn't been told that. And I doubt there's a black kid in the country who isn't aware of the reputation surrounding black people in IQ, or at least that wouldn't know, shortly after them taking the test. So stuff like that, I don't have any strong, 100% answers, because I don't think that's how science works. But it seems like there's a huge amount of evidence right now to suggest that there is, if nothing else, a very substantial social component to these, to these IQ differences.
No way. What about affirmative action?
It helps. I mean, it does help. Things have gotten better, but nowhere close to. I mean,
Also,
again,
I don't know.
average income, household wealth.
Then again, is social inequality where disparities actually a sign of any form of discrimination or institutional racism?
I would say
Sure?
I would say that there is plenty evidence to suggest that the generally lower performance of black people in our economy is a product of a fairly substantial amount of bias in how our system works. Generational inequality would probably be the biggest, sort of cause of all of that.
Generational inequality. I mean, what do you mean by that? You mean since people from Jim Crow?
Yeah, I mean, your parents probably grew up during Jim Crow, or if not them, their grandparents.
No.
No?
I mean, maybe my dad did, but no, not my mom. I don't think so.
Okay, I mean, I don't know the age of your parents, but it was fairly, recent in your lineage. I would say. I think that's fair to say. It wasn't that long ago that black people had basically no legal way of making anywhere near as much money as white people. But at all. It wasn't like a glass ceiling with women where you could conceivably do better. Nah, fuck that. Pre-Jim Crow, it's if you're black, you get your station in life. That means a lot of black folk didn't have much money. And then Jim Crow ends, sure, but it's not like the government just dropped $100,000 in everyone's bank accounts. And then the drug war begins, which ends up, leading to the systemic targeting and discrimination against largely black neighborhoods, and wealth just pours out of the black community like blood from a stone. And things aren't really getting better for them economically. Socially, things are getting better for blacks than they have been in American history, Legal equality, sure, but the money ain't there. And it's been shown, and this is hard facts right here, whether you're white or black, poorer you are, less likely you are to do well in an IQ test, or really anything in life. So if you're not as likely to do well, and if you're not as likely to get money on account of you having been born poor, that problem tends to persist through generations. Meaning that even if we have total legal equality right now, which we arguably do in the letter of the law, it doesn't mean there aren't still going to be, systemic issues that describe or explain a bias in black people's performance.
Interesting. What I don't understand is the generational thing. So I mean, Jim Crow was bad, but it was such a long time ago. Don't you think this honestly should have been rectified? Despite all the laws and all the money and scholarships and such, why would there still be economic and socioeconomic differences when black people, even in today's environment, actually do better, or at least I should say have a very large legal advantage over all of their races? I mean, yeah, you have the drug war, but I find that to be very little excuse at this stage.
I wouldn't say they have a tremendous legal advantage over anyone.
For instance, in the medical, in terms of affirmative action, black people or Hispanics a lot of academics tend to put a lot more bias for black or Hispanic occupants.
There's a decent amount of bias when it comes to university admission for blacks, but when it comes to job performance, for the most part, we're talking about quotas, which mean that if you have two candidates of equal qualifications, but one of them is a minority, that you're encouraged or inclined to hire the minority. And the laws for affirmative action vary very heavily,
that is
across
such a
different
weird
states
law.
and fields. Well, it makes sense.
That's such... Oh no, two equal. But you're never going to get an application in the first place that's completely equal, and to think that is absolutely absurd. I just find the basis of this law to be weird. It also gets weirder when you look at some things okay, so online there's something called the...
Just really quickly, I'm not trying to interrupt you, but I just want to point out that we can talk about affirmative action and whatever, purpose it may
We seem to
serve.
be just jumping off topics. I'm just going with the flow.
Of course, of course. I just want to point out, like, there, like, someone in chat just linked a study. Like, there is evidence to indicate these two things. One, that people of lower socioeconomic status, lower socioeconomic status do far poorer in life. Studies, test taking, like every element of life, they just do worse at it. And B, that if you are born poor, you are more likely to die poor, and for your children to be poor. Which means that, like, following, like, transitively, that there is an economic reason why Jim Crow laws and slavery before that would lead to black people doing more poorly on tests today, even if they themselves live in a what is purportedly a legally, neutral environment.
Interest. I just find that slavery thing to be so weird.
It's, I mean, yeah, like, it was a long time
very
ago.
few, because very few people even back then owned slaves, and I'm pretty sure, even if you look back, if you took like the genetic sample of all black people today, a lot of them wouldn't even have been alive or had anything to do with slavery.
Well, wait, but we just established though that the consequences of poverty echo throughout generations, whether or not most
black
people own slaves.
But most black people today weren't even here during America's founding. Most of them came here to the 1965 Immigration Act.
Wait. No, that's factually incorrect. The vast majority of black people in this country are here as descendants of slaves. We had a huge number of slaves in this country. Most of the black people here today are from that, not from, like, Nigeria or whatever. Now, and by the way, Nigerian immigrants are amongst the highest IQ in America. So when we talk about general, like, bad performance on the part of African Americans, we're talking about the descendants of slaves who are hurt by the economic policies that led to the poverty of their ancestors.
Okay, hold on. Let me look at that. Fuck. That's something completely different. Alright, I'll fucking look that up later. But, alright, fine.
Is this not preferable, though? I mean, wouldn't it be nice
is?
to live in a world where we believe that people are fundamentally capable of achieving the same things if they're given the opportunity? It's the American dream, right?
I mean, I personally just don't believe everyone's capable of achieving the same things if given the same tools.
Not every individual, no, but broad groups of people, certainly. And the evidence seems to suggest that as well.
I mean, some groups of people will certainly outperform one another.
Which group over which?
I mean, maybe Asian. I mean, in America, usually it's like Asian Americans outperform everyone else, and then there's white people, Hispanics, blacks, yada yada, blah blah blah.
Right, but as we've established, there can be social causes for those disparities, which means that if those causes are fixed, we could conceivably, have a equal American dream, right? That's my nationalism coming out right there. I like the American dream. I like it when it's possible, at least. You know how it is. Do you know why, by the way, Chinese people in America have, on average, higher IQ?
I think it was. I mean, I honestly forgot to say. It was something within their brain where one part of their brain. I forgot what's one of the part of the brain that focuses on logical thinking is actually way bigger in their brain, but the part of the brain that's like for like creative thinking is actually way smaller. I forgot what. Yeah. I forgot.
I love you. That was racist pseudoscience. That's a post hoc justification of, like, medieval era racist tropes against Asian people. The real reason why Asian people have a higher IQ in this country is because the Asian people in this country are immigrants, and the Asians who are wealthy enough to immigrate to America benefited from the effects that high wealth has on one's IQ. It's that simple. If you go to China right now and go, like, compare the average American to the average Chinese person, their average IQ is going to be on average lower because there are so many more poor folk there. But the Chinese immigrants who come to here, they're wealthy enough to afford the trip.
I mean, any IQ test that comes from China is actually like highly questionable. I don't think you can ever get an accurate IQ test from the communist Chinese. So I mean, I assume what you're saying is actually.
I don't know if I call them communist, but no, that's the reason why. I mean, think about it, right?
I
If
mean,
wealthier people have higher IQs, which they do, vastly so on average, and you are selecting for wealthier people when it comes to Chinese immigrants because only the wealthy ones can afford to travel, then we're talking about a relatively high IQ sector here. One of the reasons why Nigerian IQ is so high here in America too, it's not because Nigerians have giant swelling brains, not to my knowledge at least. It's because Nigeria is not a particularly wealthy country, so the ones who are able to come over here are usually the ones wealthy enough to have performed well in their own academic and educational systems, meaning they're probably pretty big brain. Whereas the blacks and Hispanics in this country don't necessarily have that initial origin, because the blacks descended from slavery, they weren't immigrants, and many of the Hispanics were here during the, the whole Texas debacle. A lot of the way to become a Mexican immigrant is very different, or Latin American immigrant is very different than the way you become a Nigerian immigrant or a Chinese immigrant. It's all social causes. I mean, you can't say for a fact there's no genetic involvement. Couldn't make that claim definitively, but it seems like there are really strong environmental arguments for most of the disparities that we see between given groups, relative local IQ. And I like that. I mean, you say you're black. I've got no reason to doubt you, and I'm white, and I kind of like the idea that, we should both be able to live in a country where not only is it believed that you and I can do whatever we want, but that there genuinely is no sort of underlying genetic inhibitor that would prevent you from being able to achieve the things that I've achieved. For instance, I keep dying in this area of Dark Souls 2. It's very low IQ of me. Maybe if you were up in here, swinging that axe, you'd best me. 2,000 IQ, defeat of the giants back in the memory of Vamar.
Mm-hmm. Where would I place yourself? Yeah, center right. I'm sorry, I was reading the chat.
Oh, no worries. For what it's worth, I do think that your perspectives on like the IQ and nationalism, what have you, they remind me much more of like a white nationalist. So I don't know if I would consider that center right, but
I mean, I can see. I mean, I certainly do some of their points. I think for an extent that they're correct on some things, though I'm not really to the extreme, as in like fucking having a damn race war and like purging non-whites, if that's what you're getting from me.
Well,
because I mean,
not.
the views that they're spewing out is really nothing different. People like Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and Ali said the exact same thing. I don't think this is anything really racist or new. I just think
Malcolm X believed that blacks would forever be mistreated in America, so black nationalism was the solution to build a power base. But he didn't believe there was some intrinsic IQ difference that meant the inferior brain of the black.
Well, no, of course not. He didn't believe any of that. Of course not. He didn't believe in that. But he was essentially on the same board as, say, like the white nationalists. As in, they both wanted racial separation, each have their own state.
I think the important distinction there is that the reason he wanted a black state is so they could live free of the oppression of whites, whereas the white nationalists want the white nationalist state so they can maintain their oppression over non-whites. I think there's a pretty key distinction there, and I'm pretty sure Malcolm X was also himself not really racist. Like, his belief was socio-political, it was about social power, but he didn't believe there was, like, a racial imperative here. It was just about freeing an oppressed group from the, hegemony of their masters. Kind of like the Turkish Kurds, we wouldn't say that they were racist just because they wanted to live free of oppression.
I mean, no, I don't think the white nationalists, at least back then, wanted to, like, oppress the blacks. I think they just wanted complete racial separations. Malcolm X certainly said nothing about... Malcolm X certainly did not hate. I don't know if he hated white people, but he just believed that black people would work better in our own little ethno states, which is why he went on board with Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam.
Oh, I don't like the Nation of Islam name, so I'm not going to defend that.
I personally would love to have seen how this state would have worked out. I think it probably would have been something that we needed at the time. Probably still do now.
Why can't we just get along here?
Because I just don't think it's certainly possible. that different people of different groups can truly get along
Wait,
together in their own state, because people are different. I mean, there really is no.
Well, all individual people are different. But what does that have to do
Well,
with
this is
race?
again, this is the problem I have with a lot of people, is that they tend to focus on the individual rather than the collective. The collective, in my opinion, always trumps the individual, because I mean, that's just how I see things. I think the individual, for the most part, is rather almost insignificant. That the collective always triumphs.
Well, why can't our
Which is why
we have a shared collective, though. We're all American. Can't we just get along?
Well, we're Americans, but we still separate ourselves into different groups. I mean, Black Americans, Mexican Americans.
Yeah, but I'm a PC gamer, and I get along with console gamers. Why should racial categories be inherently exclusionary?
And that's personally just you on a micro level. On a macro level.
Wait, but again, why do racial groups inherently have to argue with one another and fight when other groups of different people don't?
What do you mean? What do you mean? Like fucking PC gamers and like PC gamers? And
to my knowledge,
PC
gamers and console gamers haven't actually attempted to like systemically oppress one another, but that might change in the future.
I mean, yeah, just two fucking groups of people. I just don't.
I just don't think
I just don't think that's a fair comparison.
Wait, but how? So do you think all different groups should just live in different countries? Like men, women, and like people who like metal music and people who like country music. Do you think like all groups should live separately, or?
I think this is a false. I just think this is a false equivalency.
It's only a false equivalence if you can explain to me why racial groups are the ones that have to be separated.
I didn't say I want racial groups to be separate. I said it's probably going to happen at some point. Most people. The way immigration, like say in like Europe or like in America, is heading, there's been a lot of talking about scientists talking about the balkanization of the United States and Europe. If immigrations continue to happen, because
immigration is down in America. What do you mean by the balkanization of America?
Yeah, it's balkanization. Like people from because we get a lot of immigrants from like fucking Central America, Latin America, Africa, and all these groups of people always tend to stick within their own
Wait, that's not even remotely true. There's a very high degree. There's a very high degree of ethnic and cultural integration in America, more so than many other countries. The idea, like, there are some places where you'll get relative levels of ethnic enclaves, like Chinatowns or Koreatowns or what have you. But for the most part, like, America's population is made up of immigration waves. We've been doing it since the Germans back in the late 1700s. The idea that, soon, the past 18 immigration waves, we're fine, we survived those, but this one's gonna take us down. It's very strange to me,
Again, the immigration back then and today are completely different. Immigration back then, okay, yeah. And of course, I'm completely referring to the 1965 Act, since I believe that's when immigration made a completely different term. But back then, okay, yes, they were different groups of people, Irish, French, and all that, but they were essentially just white Europeans.
No, but they were discriminated against the same way blacks and Mexicans were when they came in. This argument that those immigration waves were different because they were white, they weren't treated that way at the time. It was just
they were discriminated. They were discriminated against, but definitely they were discriminated against. Question is, why would you think that if these people were discriminated back then, that these discriminations won't continue now if you decide to bring in a bunch of races today?
That's a non sequitur. I do expect racism to exist. You have to make the argument.
No, I didn't say exist. I said let's lower or lessen.
It has lowered or lessened. It has. We don't have people putting up signs saying no Hispanics need apply in major population centers. We have gotten a little bit better about this. But again, you're backing off the larger prescriptive argument here, which I'm I'm super curious about this, because you're saying groups of people will fight, and I'm interested in seeing how an ethno-state would play out, or maybe we're just going to keep fighting if we're like this. I don't understand why race is a category that demands people fight.
Because
and then you
that's
said
the first thing people see, man. that's just how people are. I mean, I don't think you need to be much of a scientist to see that race is like integral to any
And
fucking discussion.
and gender and like hair color,
Yeah,
just because it's a visible trait doesn't necessarily mean that people are naturally gonna form ethnostates over
they're
it.
not gonna. They don't necessarily. Okay, they don't automatically form ethnostates, but they just stick to their own kind.
But no,
I
they
mean,
don't.
even I mean,
America is
yeah,
made
they
of immigrants.
do.
You no,
Yeah, and they
you're,
usually and they
you're
usually
arguing
stick.
something that isn't substantiated right now.
Just
You're
because,
arguing
what
that
do
like people of races are biologically inclined to stick with each other and not stick with the broader group.
they do, yeah, because that's exactly what they do. I mean, even in the
What
area,
gene?
even in the area. I'm not talking about gene. I'm
You
not
said
talking about.
biologically.
Yeah, they have I didn't say biologic. I said they have a tendency to go stick with their own group. I mean, do you? I mean, you
Wait,
don't
so
see. I mean,
wait,
I mean, you
wait.
just don't. I
But is
mean,
that
come. I mean,
cultural or biological?
well, I mean, can't they not? I mean, is biology and culture not the same? I mean, we're going back
Wait,
to this original.
what? Is
With this
culture and biology the same thing?
Well, I mean, where do you think? I mean, again, we're going back to the same. We're going back to square one.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Honestly.
I ask you again. You're black. Who do you have more
Right.
in common with culturally? A white dude in New York or an African?
Probably a black American.
That wasn't one of the two choices.
I
available to
know.
you.
Culturally speaking, probably
This
the white
isn't
guy.
this isn't something you
Yeah,
should
I
be
know.
deliberating over. You couldn't even speak the same language as the person in Africa.
I mean, with a fair question, say who would I have more in common? I mean, a fucking a white guy or a black American. I mean, even then, black Americans are almost genetically different to the black Africans since we've
Well,
actually have
no,
a.
no, 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 no,
Yeah,
no,
we
no,
do.
no,
We have
no,
like
no,
most
no, no,
black
come on, you're
Americans have
evading
like
the
a
question,
white.
dude. You
Not
know
if-
that culture and biology are not intrinsically linked. There is absolutely no evidence to suggest that our
Well, where do you
cultural.
think-
Wait. We've been over this. Cultural beliefs don't stem from our biology. The reason races have different cultures, and you acknowledged this earlier, is from a multiplicity of socioeconomic and environmental factors that determine how we lead. If you're born in America, no matter your race, you're going to be an American, and you're going to share cultural values of an American most of the time. And if you're born in Africa, I don't know, whatever country, I don't know much about Africa, no matter your race, you're probably going to adopt the attitudes there. Likewise with every other racial group on the planet. This just isn't a product of biology. It's not a product of race. It's just a product of, what you're born into. And the reason this is important is because you're right now suggesting that there is some inherent predilection for people of racial groups to advocate for their own interests over others. And then I say, okay, there are other groups of people that you can distinguish themselves along that do not do this. What makes race so specifically inclined towards forming this in-group preference sort of bias? And I don't think you've answered that, which leads me to believe you think that there's some kind of emitter in the genealogy of one's race that leads them towards bias in favor of their own race over any other group biologically with no cultural factors, to which the only reasonable prescriptive solution would be an ethnostate. But I don't want to live in an ethnostate, and the evidence doesn't suggest any of the sort of preconceptions that have led to that solution. And ethnostates, by and large, seem to be pretty bad ideas prescriptively. So, I just I don't know where you're getting that from.
Why are ethnostates bad? I mean, also going back to what you. Oh, before you.
Do you know what
before
what building an ethnostate in America would do to its population?
Well, yes, it would cause a massive civil war. It would cause a massive civil war and cause millions of people, possibly thousands, if not millions of people, to die.
Yeah, so I'm not super huge on that personally. Also, I think that black people are human and should be able to live here.
And I didn't say we weren't human.
No, I know, but a lot of people, you gotta wonder. You probably, if you're a black American, your family probably arrived here before my family did.
I get.
Fourth generation immigrant.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry if I keep interrupting you. I tend to have these thoughts all over the head.
No,
I mean, I guess that you're completely right when you say that people tend to tend to come over and tend to adopt the value of America. But wouldn't that only happen if said group of people were the minority and there was a majority established?
If a majority, so we have 300 million people in this country. If a huge number of a different cultural group Not even necessarily an ethnic group, because the Irish are a different ethnic group. But I think a fuck ton of Irish people moving to America probably wouldn't change much. Not that there are enough Irish people in the world to lead to that. Oh, hold on. Yes?
Is there a cup in there?
Is there a cup?
Yeah, my cup.
Which cup?
I don't know, big cup.
Big cup. Here, I'll get you a big cup. Yeah, hold on. I'll get you 2 big
I
cups.
totally forgot I put Artemion's bed out here, and I feel bad now for sleeping it up.
Yeah, he's been
Oh
lonely.
shit, I got 2.
2 big cups.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Love you. All right, sorry. And
Hello.
yeah, and but if a huge number of a different cultural group came to this country and they like they were like a huge, not even necessarily majority, but like a huge minority, yeah, they would definitely change the culture. I'm fine with that. I mean, that's just how cultures work, right?
Yeah.
Dude, American culture would fucking suck if it weren't for you, if it weren't for my brothers over in, you know, in Harlem or what have you. Most of, like, American pop culture is highly derivative of the contributions of African Americans.
I mean, yeah, like rap music, like, you mean like musically wise?
I mean, that's just one, but, like, yeah, the blues and jazz led to rock. Like, basically all, like, American music is derivative from the contribution of black Americans. Obviously, you know, you got, like, a classical or what have you, but no one fucking listens to classical. Cringe? Yeah, fuck you guys, suck my dick. Yeah, so, like, I mean, you got that, you know, huge contributions to film in the 1960s. Before that, I think, I'm not a film major, I'm sure this, you know, they could add something in here that, that I'm not aware of, but like culture is influenced heavily by the interaction between people of, you know, different cultures, different environments, and I think that's a beautiful thing. There are some values I like more that I want to preserve, and some I fucking hate and would happy to, you know, see change.
Interesting. I've got a question. Could you link me some of these studies? I'd like to read these myself.
Which studies?
Fucking. Some of your, like, any studies, like any pointers on like race and IQ. I'm actually quite interested. I've always heard the right side. I never actually got to hear the other side of the argument.
Yeah, I don't have any sources on me.
Do you have any pointers I could go to?
Yeah, I think I do. What specific? So are we talking about like IQ tests being influenced by socioeconomic conditions, or are we talking? Or are we talking like
race and IQ tests? Race and IQ tests concern socioeconomic conditions. Maybe one about race and IQ in terms of like any differences within brain development.
I don't know if I have one concerning brain developments, but yeah, here. You know what? I'm unearthing it. Because this is the old draft. Hold on. This is the old draft of the alt-hype research document that I was going to do. I've since moved on to a different document to reformat my thoughts. A lot of this is not relevant to what you're talking about, but this is the largest and most comprehensive breakdown of the race IQ discussion that I have assembled presently. It's got a lot of fucking academic articles linked in there. There's a lot of largely irrelevant stuff too. But yeah, here, I'm going to link that in chat now. But this
Please do. I would like to read about this.
Yeah, there you go. And there are more studies that I've mentioned in this discussion that I do not have here in this document, and that's not because they don't exist. I've looked at them. I haven't been added to that segment as well. Also, if you're so interested, you've probably heard memes about this, but it legitimately is a good source. You should probably try giving a look to Sean's video on the bell curve. I know he's like cut or whatever, but it was genuinely a phenomenal piece of work that I enjoyed, you know, consuming quite a bit.
Why do you keep calling me a fucking thud, a chud?
Well, you've given a lot of ethno-nationalist talking points, and a chud is sort of a slang pejorative for being a conservative, so.
I mean, I'm like, center. Again, I'm like center right. I mean, I don't consider myself to the far right. But I was just, in terms of like saying things with race, I mean, that's pretty. I don't think that's too. I mean, I personally just don't think that's a pretty like far right or bad view per se. And recognizing the collective mindset. I mean, I personally, like I said, I myself don't care much about race. I mean, like I said, I personally will befriend people of different races. This is just something I've personally seen with my own eyes and have read about a little online. I mean, I haven't done the exactly extensive research
Yeah,
on
yeah,
this,
of course,
but,
of course.
like,
And also, it
that's
should be noted, by the way, and I'm not trying to be patronizing because this is legitimately a huge factor. You didn't exactly come here prepped for a debate. You were just in the voice
yeah,
channel.
I really didn't fucking do. I mean, I'm really bad at debating as well, and especially since I'm a bit nervous since I was actually on call. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't know why people. I don't know why people are here getting fucking getting pissy pants.
listen,
don't think
I
my- I
promise
don't
you,
think
my community is going to piss their pants exactly the same amount as they normally do. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Out of curiosity, before we go, because I gotta read Donuts, I gotta fucking play Dark Souls. Didn't expect a full-long discussion. As much as I enjoyed having it, how did you hear about me, or how did you come to be on my server?
I saw your Nick Fuentes video and I honestly just died laughing.
Oh, did you
Nick
enjoy
Fu-
it?
Yes, I actually did. That guy's such a faggot. I'm sorry, am I not allowed to say faggot on the call?
Well, I say faggot, but that's because I'm actually into men and dicks. So
I know.
yeah,
no,
I feel I have that right. Do you, out of curiosity, before we go, do you think there's anything wrong with dudes being into dudes?
No, I am.
Okay, all right. Then we can both say it. All right, I'm glad we can be we can be united. And
I mean, I think the fucking gay arguments are so fucking bullshit, to be honest.
the
I've honestly
gay or
I've-
anti-gay arguments.
The anti-gay arguments, I've heard it all, honestly. I just think it's stupid.
Yeah.
The evidence that they have is pretty flimsy.
Oh god, they have. Oh yeah,
Like-
evidence. All existing evidence suggests that there's
Yeah,
no
like the
fucking
fucking-
reason to discriminate against gay people.
Oh yeah, like the fucking gays and pedophile shit that they keep spewing. That's honestly the most retarded one, because I fucking argue with someone who keeps saying that, and I just don't know. I just don't think you can call a pedophile someone like exclusively attracted to men. I think they're just attracted to the age of the child.
Yeah, there are a lot of. I've actually read on that too. Yeah, there are a lot of pedophiles who are, when they have sex with adults, they're quite straight. But when they have sex with children, they're agnostic towards the sex of
Yeah.
the child, which makes sense considering that children aren't sexed or sexual; they're just children. But yeah. Anyway, it's just what's especially funny is that that kind gentleman that Nick Fuentes was spending some quality time with, the Lolly Socks person, it has themselves, quite a bit of lolly memorabilia, I should say. It's a little interesting to go that way, but you know.
Yes, I mean, what, him sucking on horse cock?
Hey, listen. Okay, a broken clock is right a few times a day. Let's not go overboard. There are Hey,
I mean, he's just as much. I mean, it's just so weird that he's wearing all that fucking shit. I mean, he doesn't even fucking suit him right, to be honest.
you think he's too, like, ripped for the skirt and stuff?
Yes, it does. It's so fucking weird.
Hey,
And that
listen.
actually makes me wonder who fucking. They just both look like such massive faggots. Like, which one you think is the bottom in the relationship?
I'd like to think, I would like to believe that they have both tried it out. In my opinion, I'm going for the egalitarian answer here. Well, here's my promise to you. Okay, I'm not ripped at all. So if I ever wear a skirt and fucking crop top, I'll look better in it. Okay.
Oh no.
All right. Hey, thank you for talking with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I guess I should return to chat and fucking receive whatever fucking shit I get from these people.
Godspeed. I believe in you. Okay.
Alright, till next time.
Till next time.
Oh, wait. Where'd you put the studies?
Oh fuck yeah! Wait, I linked it in chat, not to you. Here you go. I'll link it in what's a good place to put it? Isn't there a channel specifically for this? Collins chat. There we go. I'll put it in Collins chat.
Alright,
which is
thank you, friend.
No problem. You have a good one, okay?
All the time.
Trans rights.
You too. Oh, no.